Hello, everyone, and welcome to New Direction. My name's Jay Izso, and oh man, do we have another great show for you today. Listen, I know that many of you, think you're great networkers, right? You go out, you network, and you go, I go to all these, groups, and I go to all these networking events, and I just want to ask you an honest question, and I need you to be seriously honest. How's it working for you, really? I mean, if I went and I said to you, hey, show me your top 30 best contacts, how much return on that investment that you've gone into? How well has that turned into business for you? My guess is that percentage of you who would say to me that it worked well is so low that, in fact, most of you are failing at this networking thing. In fact, I would argue that there's probably more of you out there who said, well, I've tried this networking thing, and I got to be honest with you, it just doesn't work. You wouldn't be alone in that thought process, by the way, because the fact of the matter is, it probably isn't working because you're not doing it right. Because here's what we tend to do. And I just had this conversation with my friend Joe Weitzkel, who's Senior Vice President of Sales at Madison Global. And we just had this conversation Friday night. And it was so interesting. Because here's what we do. We go to a networking event looking for something transactional rather than trying to develop the relationship. And you know what we do? We mess it all up. Because if we don't get a transaction immediately, networking's not working. That's what the beauty is about this book called The Short List. Absolutely fantastic. You want to know how to develop a better network that's actually collaborative, where you guys are working together to achieve something greater? This is the answer, folks. This book's the answer. I'm just telling you, we've been doing this show for almost 10 years, and we've talked networking on this show. I'm telling you, I've never read a better networking book than this. Never. In the 10 years, the 300, 400 shows that we've done, I've never read a better networking book. Ever. The Short List. David Ackert, you might know that name, certainly, actor, but now, business development, I hate using this word, guru, but really he's a thought leader in the area and he's outstanding. So let me introduce you to him because he's just awesome. David Ackert is the co-founder and CEO of Ackert Incorporated and its subsidiary PipelinePlus. He's a highly regarded business development thought leader over the past 2 decades. David has pioneered revenue acceleration programs for hundreds of professional services firms around the globe. He is the founder of several groundbreaking ventures in the industry, including Legal Lift, the MLR 100, the MLR 200, BDI, numerous managing partner roundtables in the PipelinePlus software suite. His programs have won the Your Honor Awards in both the US and Canada, and his software has been featured in NLJ's Technologies on the Rise. David regularly keynotes at partner retreats, and you know how I feel about my fellow co-speakers. If he's speaking, hire him, and speaks at industry conferences. He also serves as guest lecturer at USC's Marshall School of Business and Carnegie Mellon University and at the UCLA School of Law. The Short List is an Amazon bestseller and gold medal winner of the 2025 Nonfiction Books Award. In addition to authoring The Short List, David has contributed quotes and articles in numerous media. The list is so long. I'll give you a few: Wall Street Journal, LA Times, The Recorder, Los Angeles Business Journal. Where hasn't he been quoted or done something? That's probably a shorter list. He's got a great podcast. His Market Leaders podcast has won several JD Super Readers Choice Awards. Big volunteer with the Big Brothers Big Sisters programs in LA, and co-founder of so many other charities. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the show and welcome to the first time ever to A New Direction, and I hope it will not be your last. David Ackert, welcome to the show.
Jay, thanks for the warm welcome. Glad to be here.
I love this book, but what can I say? I do love this book. So let's dig into this. The introduction has an interesting opening. It's called Quality Over Quantity. And you make a statement. He said, you can have whatever you want in business if you know the right people. It all comes down to having the right conversations at the right time with the right people. So let's just start there, right? Because I know that there are people listening and watching the show saying, well, hold on, David, the right people. What do you mean the right people, right? I've got a whole bunch of people that I think are the right people. What do you mean by that?
Right. Well, so let me tie a few things together that you've already touched on. You mentioned that in my earlier career, I was an actor. That's right. I was a television actor. And what you've probably heard about that line of work is that Hollywood is very much a who you know kind of a town. Well, I came out here knowing basically no one. So I had to start networking. And I found that I was okay at it. I mean, I was gregarious enough that I could strike up a conversation with people and, looking to kind of make friends. But like you said, I had this tendency to make it transactional. Like I would assess at the end of every introduction, every conversation, what did I get out of that? Was that worth time? Should I have another conversation with that person? So it wasn't even so much about assessing whether or not these were the right people. It was I getting the right outcomes? And I think that was a rather naive way of going about it. In fact, I found that I started burning out on it. So you earlier said, is networking working and are you failing? I think I came to the realization that I was failing at networking and that I got to a point where I wasn't really enjoying it anymore. I kind of dreaded, when someone was like, oh, you should meet so-and-so. I'm like, another blind date that's probably not going to go very well. And I'm going to feign interest in this person. And the fact of the matter is, I keep looking for what I'm going to get out of it. And, I know that I'm supposed to be helpful. And, I'd learned all the right give to get kind of notions, but my heart wasn't in it because they weren't the right people. So let's unpack that. By right people, I mean, these weren't people where if there wasn't the promise of some sort of transaction on the other end of the conversation, I wouldn't hang out with them. I wouldn't even want to grab a beer with them. So the chemistry was missing. And I learned that if the chemistry isn't there, then this is not an endeavor worth investing any time in. Like I am being disingenuous from jump. So chemistry ended up being one of the ways that I started realizing, okay, if I have a natural chemistry with this person, if we're starting to recognize that we have similar values and we're like-minded and striking up a conversation is easy and we don't have to agree on everything, but at least we're having a respectful dialogue. That's interesting to me. Like I would do that just for fun. I would do that just to fill a social hour, right? So chemistry was really important. Character was really important. I needed to make sure that this is someone who is cut of cloth that I can hang with, right? From a values perspective. And then ultimately we would get into things like, okay, is there commerce potential? Is this person collaborative? Is this a taker or a giver? And I wanted to surround myself with more givers so that I could be a better giver and that would really build on itself. So once I started to create a little bit of a filter, if you will, and look at people through that filter of, is this the right person for me to even begin this journey with? This whole process got a lot easier. And the quality over quantity formula started to take shape for me, where I started to create a short list.
Which is a great segue into, let's go to part one. Because this book is, by the way, folks, this book is divided up into 4 parts. And at the end of each chapter, David has done exercises that he's timed out, by the way, how long it should take you to do these things. So this is more than just a book that you read. This is actually a book that has homework to do. And I know some of you go, oh, Jay, I don't want to do homework. But you know what? You need to do the homework. I'm just telling you, it's so good. The exercises, I found myself doing the exercises I was reading. Listen, some of them are 10 minutes, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, some maybe a little bit longer, but it's well worth the investment. You're going to love this. So David, let's go to part one of the 4-part book, Creating and Optimizing a Short List. Chapter 1's entitled A Winning Strategy. And you ask a great question right at the beginning. It says, how many relationships should I cultivate? And I think it's a great question. And you bring up Dr. Robin Dunbar and the Dunbar number, which is 150 basically, right, through the research. And then you bring up, of course, Vilfredo Pareto with the Pareto number 80-20. And so you started putting this together for me. And I was like going, oh, where's he going with this Dunbar number, Pareto principle? So let's talk about this a little bit. How many relationships should I really cultivate, David?
Sure. Well, I'm not here to answer that question for you because it's going to be a little bit different for everybody. Some of this depends on whether you're in more of a B2B dynamic where that number can be smaller because you're whale hunting, or if you're more in a B2C where obviously you need a very broad network. And some of it's also your personality. You know, if you're more of an introvert, it should be a smaller number. If you're more of an extrovert, it could be a larger number. But what I will tell you is this. The research shows, and you mentioned Robin Dunbar, so evolutionary psychologist. He did a number of studies, and what he discovered is that the number of people that we can just sort of maintain in our consciousness, like, oh, I run into this person in the street and I remember their name, or I remember the context of how we know each other, rather than just, that's a familiar face, but I'm embarrassed to start a conversation because I don't remember how we know each other, right? That number of people that we can actually sustain a connection to is about 150. And he has study after study where he's validated that number. It's known as Dunbar's number. And then, but we're not looking at the long list. We're looking at the short list. So then I applied the 80-20 rule to that. You end up with roughly 30 people. And I validated it through our own research. We've had a relationship development app in the marketplace for about 14 years now called PipelinePlus Tracker. And people use that app to identify their short list, and then they'll say, oh, I had lunch with Bob and I took, Jay out to the game, and I, went to dinner with Mary, whatever. Like, they're sort of tracking their activities. It's kind of like a light CRM, right? And what we found was that the users who were reporting a growth in their business while they were using the app had some common denominators versus all of the other users who were just kind of spinning their wheels, failing at networking, as you call it. Mm-hmm. So the ones who were succeeding and consistently building their business had between 9 and 35 targets in the app. So there's that number, 30. Some of them were lower than that. Some of them were a little higher, but nobody had more than 35 and was growing their business. You would think this is counterintuitive. We learned never eat alone. We learned the more relationships, the better, right? But actually, there's a point at which that ceases to be sustainable. There's a point at which what you're doing is a light touch across a broad band of people, as opposed to going deep with a select few. And when you go deep with a select few, now you don't have to worry about the competition, right? Because it's like, oh, you're my guy. I'm going to do business with you every single time because you put in the time, you've built that relationship with me, you're on my short list and I'm on yours. This is that inner circle, that concept of the posse, right? Where we're hanging together and we're going to be doing business with each other. So 9 to 35 people was this kind of sweet spot we found among our user base. The other thing that we found that was really interesting was that their short lists were diversified. It wasn't just one kind of relationship. It wasn't just referral sources, let's say. Some of these relationships were clients where it was repeat business. Some of these relationships were prospects, but bottom of funnel prospects where the likelihood of conversion was pretty high. Some of these people were referral sources, certainly, but proven referral sources who've already sent business in the past and are likely to again. So again, as you're curating this short list, you're looking for evidence. Who are the people who are likely to lead to future success based on history? The third thing we found, this was fascinating to me, was the average number of interactions between first contact and first contract was 14.
Yeah.
14 interactions.
Yeah, interesting.
Now, this goes directly, it flies directly in the face of what you and I have both been talking about in terms of that transactional mindset. Because if you're thinking one and done, you were 13 interactions shy of getting work or building a relationship or building momentum. You give up too quickly because you've got your eye on the wrong thing. So staying in the game actually pays off, but it requires patience. And again, it requires a short list mentality. You can't have 14 interactions with 200 people. There's not enough time in the day.
Right. Yeah. You know what? You had some fascinating numbers. And as a psychological professional myself, that kind of, and guy who taught stats in colleges, I'm kind of all nerded out on your numbers. So I'm just going to be really honest with you there. One of the things that I could hear maybe some people push back on, and you said there's nothing wrong with focusing on relationships that return value for value, is what you say here at the end of chapter 1. But there's going to be some people out there who go, well, Dave, Jay, I don't want to just dismiss people.
Sure.
I don't want to do that.
You never know.
I don't know how I feel about, going, okay, just focusing on relationships that return value for value.
Yeah.
Now, to my mind, correct me if I'm wrong, I'm like going, okay, well, you know what? I have a personal friend list that I'm not going to dump. Okay.
Sure.
Even if they can't help, even if they're not really helping, I've got dear friends. I'm never going to get rid of
Yeah.
those. But in my professional relationships, the ones that I'm looking to grow, right? That small short list, everybody can't be on the list.
Right.
So help them understand that there's nothing wrong with focusing on the relationships that return value for value.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, no one's telling you to fire your friends here. That's a completely different list. You can have as
Right.
many as you can manage. But I think ultimately, the book starts by asking the reader to clarify their SMART goal. So SMART, the acronym: specific, measurable, actionable, realistic, and time bound, right?
Right.
And once you identify your SMART goal, so it might be for you, I want to increase the size of my business by 30% this year. Or it might be, I want to launch my new endeavor and I need to get some investors and I need to hire a small team so we can get this startup off the ground. Or it might be, I'm in sales and I want to increase my, numbers by X, or I want to increase my close rate by Y, or whatever it is. This is a SMART goal. And this is where you've said, okay, come hell or high water, this year, I better be successful at least this one thing, right? Well, whatever your SMART goal is, there's a short list of people tied to its success. You want to kick off a startup? Fantastic. Here's who you're going to need on your short list. You're going to need some investors. You're going to need a recruiter. You're going to need maybe some people who you've already worked with, who you plan to recruit and bring into your executive team. You're going to need your first handful of customers, right? And you're going to need to validate all of this. You're probably going to need a good accountant. You're going to need a good lawyer, right? This is your short list. And this is the success of your endeavor this year depends on surrounding yourself with those right people. You're a salesperson, great. You're going to need a short list. It's going to consist of prospects. You might need a few internal allies so that you can get work off your plate. You free up the time to pursue those big whales. You're going to need maybe somebody who's going to help you with market intelligence or help you with back office, however your business is constructed. These are the people on your short list. So, this is not some new crazy concept. If you really kind of step back and look at your life, you want to buy a house, great. You're going to need a realtor. You're probably going to need your spouse to buy in. You're going to need a mortgage lender. There's a short list. Yeah. Right. So everything we do has a short list associated with it. And the book is simply saying that you want to be very selective about who these people are, and you can't treat them transactionally, because ultimately, unless you're just going to buy one house this one time, you're probably going to want to buy an investment property after that. And then you're probably going to want to make an addition to that home. Like, all of this is going to have an affiliated short list where the depth of that relationship and the extent to which you have traded value for value and the extent to which you have vetted their character and their chemistry, and that you've really, created this inner circle that supports the goal, you'll find the goal is more successful.
You started moving into chapter 2 with the SMART goals. I do think that is critical, because what you said here, before we dig into that a little bit deeper, there is something that you brought up in terms of intrinsic motivators, and I want you to help me make the connection here, because you take a book. I'm a big Gary Chapman fan of The 5 Languages of Love.
Yeah.
And the 5 Languages of Appreciation, and you talk about the 4 intrinsic motivators resonate most in professional services: the monetary compensation, positive feedback, a support system, and attention from senior partners, which, by the way, correlate with the physical gifts, words of affirmation, acts of service, and quality time.
Right.
Help us understand the intrinsic motivators in terms of knowing what we want, which is the title of chapter 2. Why is that? What is the big connection there for us?
Yeah, well, many times in the corporate world, where I spend a lot of my time, the SMART goals that we've set are extrinsically mandated, right? So it's like, okay, well, here's your sales target. It's, more than what you made, and that's set by your manager. Or your investors come to you and say, okay, your little startup is underperforming. By this time next year, it better have doubled in size. So these are extrinsic motivators. And in order for you to be able to surround yourself with people who are really going to have their heart in it, and for you to have your heart in it, you have to tie these to whatever your intrinsic motivators are. And most people, they may know about the love languages or the languages of appreciation. Like, oh yeah, I picked up an issue of Cosmo and I glanced at that and I think it's cute and maybe my spouse and I will talk about it sometime, but they haven't actually stepped back and think about how it plays out in the workplace. Because the fact of the matter is, if people are motivated by gifts, if they are motivated from a monetary component, then you need to make sure that you're compensating them accordingly. And not everyone is. There are going to be some people who work for you or some people who are collaborating with you who are motivated by, let's say, quality time. And so we have this tendency in corporate America to just throw money at every problem and just assume that everyone is going to be motivated by money. And when we start to pay attention to how the people on our short list are really motivated from an intrinsic perspective, we can then make sure that they stay compelled to help us. And again, we can exchange value for value because we understand what they really do value.
I love that so much, because I think we focus on the gifts, right? The money piece. I think we stay focused on there. But knowing my love languages, knowing my wife's love language, and I try to know the love languages of my employees and my clients for sure. It's not always tied to money. Everybody wants to say it's tied to money. It's not tied to money. So often, more frequently, it is the words of affirmation. It is spending a little more time. It is doing something that helps them reduce their effort. And I think we get lost in this idea that it's just always about money, and people's love languages just don't work that way. I mean, they just don't. For me, I get a lot of joy doing this.
Yeah.
Right? I don't know about you. I don't make
one of yours might be quality time, Jay.
Well, it's actually it's words of affirmation.
That makes sense too. Yeah.
So my first love language is touch, right?
Yes.
But my second love language is words of affirmation, and I get so affirmed doing this that the money doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Right. And so that's that, and I think, that's why, I love doing it.
Yeah.
Because I get so much from it. And I think when we know who those people and what their language is in that short list, I think those motivators work well. So good. His name's David Ackert. The book's entitled The Short List: How to Drive Business Development by Focusing on the People Who Matter Most. Outstanding. Available everywhere books are sold. Certainly Amazon as well. Bestseller. You're listening to him here on A New Direction. Hey, folks, you know what? You tune into A New Direction to grow your business and your mindset, but you can't move forward if you're worried about what's lurking in your inbox. That's where Data 443's Siren, CYREN, comes in. It's the industry standard for real-time email security and URL filtering. They stop phishing and malware before they strike, so you can focus on your success, not your safety. Don't let a cyber attack derail your journey. Check it out. Go to data443.com. Check out Siren today and secure your future. And also Linda Craft and Linda Craft Team Realtors. We all know that buying and selling a home isn't just a transaction, it's a major life transition. So whether you're buying your first place, making room for a new baby, or downsizing for retirement, it can all be incredibly stressful. This is why you need the Linda Craft team. For over 40 years, Linda and her team have been helping people in the local community here in the Research Triangle Park navigate these big life changes, but they've helped people all over the world. Her team doesn't just sell houses, they take the stress out of the process so you can focus on your future. Don't go it alone. Let 40 years of experience work for you. Visit lindacraft.com. That's Linda Craft, LINDACRAFT.com. And we're back here on A New Direction with my friend David Ackert. Well, he doesn't know we're friends, but I've just claimed that automatically. His book, The Short List: How to Drive Business Development by Focusing on the People Who Matter Most. You spoke about the SMART goals, and I've had a lot of people who've talked about SMART goals. But one of the things that you say here, and there was a little piece of research, I think it was McKesney and Hulling, or I think Huling maybe, that you can make a bunch of SMART goals, but we can only really do 2 or 3.
Yeah.
Do you have a priority when you think about the SMART goals that you focus on that says, okay, when I'm developing my short list or what I want to accomplish the short list, these are my 2 or 3 goals? Is there something for you personally that you focus on?
Yeah. I mean, I have seen this play out, like most ambitious professionals. I would start off with a lot of goals. And what I found over the years is that I have a finite amount of attention and energy. And so I can try to get half of 10 of them done by the end of the year and be frustrated, or I can just focus on 2 or 3. And that certainly syncs up with the research that I cite in the book. I also have learned through this shortlist methodology that each of these goals has an affiliated shortlist, and they probably are going to be a different set of people depending on the goal. There might be some overlap, but if you think 9 to 35 people per SMART goal, the number starts to add up pretty quickly. So that's why, 1, 2, 3 tops, especially if those shortlists don't overlap, is about all that I think people can reasonably take on. Now, of course, this depends on how ambitious your short goals are. If your SMART goals are, if your SMART goal is to, I don't know, lose 3 pounds, like maybe that's not going to require much of a short list or a lot of energy. But for those of us who are in business and we really are looking to meaningfully expand an enterprise, I find that keeping that list modest is the best way to be ambitious.
In the SMART goals, right? One of the pieces I think that we may ignore, and correct me if I'm wrong here, that we may ignore when it comes to the short list of networking is the measurement piece of what we're doing. And I feel that may be a shortcoming for us, because we'll put out these goals, say, well, I want to meet X number of people or whatever. But, what we're talking about here, I believe, is what you're saying is, what am I measuring here specifically? Because I know that I've been told over and over and over again that what gets measured gets done.
Yeah.
Right. And so when we look at measurement, give people some ideas of what they may want to measure in creating this short list. Just a few.
Sure.
ideas.
You mean tied to the SMART goals specifically?
Yes.
Sure.
And in your short list of what we're trying to measure here.
Yeah. Well, ultimately, the reason that I like this framework of the SMART goal, and you got to unpack it. People say, oh, yeah, SMART goal. I know what that means. But actually, they get as far as specific, and then they stop thinking it through.
Right.
So specific obviously means, instead of just, I want more money this year, like you got to be specific about how much more money. And measurable, I think, is a branch on that tree, because measurable challenges you to get numeric about it. You can't measure it unless there's a number associated with it. So how much more money, or by what percentage exactly? And then, of course, it ends with a T, so time bound. What's the deadline? Now let's look at the ones that we haven't unpacked yet. So there's specific, measurable, and then there's actionable. Now, actionable is really important, because many times when we set goals, we talk about outcomes that are beyond our control. So I'm going to double my business. Well, actually, if you unpack that, that doesn't have a lot to do with you. You're certainly involved, but that has to do with the people who are hiring you for business, or that has to do with the customers who are buying your products and services, right? It's actually their action. So that's not an actionable goal. That's not something that's in your control. You want to make sure that this is a goal that ultimately is reflective of the actions that you can take, because you can't control what they do. So now, obviously, there's going to be action, reaction. You're going to take actions. They're going to have a reaction. But you want to make sure, as you're fleshing out this goal, what are the things that you have control over that you're going to set in motion? Bake that into the goal. And then the other letter we haven't touched on is R, realistic. It's totally subjective, right? What is realistic for one person might seem completely unrealistic for another. So the way that I like to think about this is 50% believability. Now, I have a pretty high tolerance for risk. If you have a lower tolerance for risk, you may want to make that 90% believable, but you never want it to be 100% believable.
Right.
Now it's not a goal, it's a foregone conclusion. So for me, I figure life is a co-creation. If I put myself fully out there, the universe will conspire to meet me halfway and good things will happen. So I figure, okay, if my goal is 50% believable, like I can be like, yeah, you know what? There's at least a 50% chance that this is going to happen this year if I really apply myself, then I'm going to lean into it. But if it's 40% or 30%, my own sense of self-sabotage, my own cynicism is going to find a way to undermine that goal. I see it happen every single time that I get out over my skis. So this is just through self-awareness and trial by error. I've discovered this about myself. But for everyone, that's going to be a little bit different. And you want to be making that measurable goal, that SMART goal framework, and applying it to any objective that you set out, because then and only then you can build the short list around it.
Here's where I applied it, as I was reading the entire book and I was searching through it. I was thinking there are so many times, like I go to a social event.
Mm,
I don't have any SMART goals for
mm,
that, right? I don't think through it. It's just a social event. But if I was really to apply, I think what you're saying here, and you do say it in the book, right? If I'm going to a social event, if I'm going to a networking event, what is going to be, what is the pregame, what's going to be my pregame here in terms of what are my goals for this event? Or let's just say it's just having a conversation where I've met somebody, right? And I've had my very first meeting with this person. What's my SMART goals for that meeting with that person? It it really does get more granular than this idea that's generally preached about SMART goals, around my business or whatever. The way you discuss it is no, you have to have SMART goals for every interaction that you're having. Did I miss that, or am I somewhere close to
No,
that?
no, no. It's true. I think that, throughout the book, and this is just a philosophy that I have, and I would be shocked if you don't as well, because you're a coach. One of the things coaches are always asking their clients is, what does success look like?
Right.
Right? What's your intention behind this? I think coaches help their clients live more purposeful, intentional lives. Well, I try to infuse that throughout the entire book, because one of the things that I have found is that networking can be very unintentional, right? In other words, well, I'm just going to go to this event. And here's this mantra that we hear over and over again. And I think it's so dangerous. We tell ourselves, you never know.
Hmm.
Okay, I'll have lunch with this guy. You never know. Or I'll, go to this event because you never know. I'll go to this conference. I hear it's good, and you never know. And the problem with you never know is occasionally you're right. Lightning strikes and you meet some rando and they hire you and you're like, see, I have to just keep putting myself out there because once in a blue moon, it works out. But I think we flipped this equation on its head, right? Because the fact of the matter is it's not just a numbers game. You're not just rolling dice
Right.
over and over again. You can be more thoughtful about this. You can position yourself for success. You can put yourself in target rich rooms as opposed to rooms with people and a pulse and some hope.
Right.
And
Right.
I think that you never know mantra, which we hear so often in networking, is actually very dangerous because it gets us into this habit of time wasting activities that occasionally pay off and prove the theory.
So well said. So good. I'm so glad you said that. Because listen, I know I've been guilty of it. Okay. First of all, I can't deny it because I've been guilty of it. It's okay. I know that he's, not my priest or anything like that, but I'm going to confess that I have been guilty of it. And it's really, really true. This whole idea of, well, what do you got to lose? Yeah. Type thing. And if I was more intentional and if I was if as smart as I am, if I was really smart about my goals of really thinking about developing the short list, it would have been so much better. And you're so right. And it's so good. This takes me to chapter 3, where it's entitled "The 3 Relationship Categories on Your Short List." And I want you to kind of help us understand these three categories: clients, prospects, and connectors. You alluded to it a little bit, but why these 3 categories, first of all, and then help us dig into why we're digging into them, I guess,
Sure.
uh, into each one. Go ahead.
Sure. Well, again, this ties back to the research. What we found was that the users in the app that were most successful had a diversified pipeline. And the categories that they were focused on were clients. So these are people who you're already doing business with. They've already demonstrated that they understand what you do and they're willing to pay for it. Right now, you may not be in the professional services realm. That's really where I spend most of my time. So law firms, accounting firms, consulting firms, anybody who's sort of selling their services, selling their expertise, right? But if for you, it's your biggest customers, that's fine. But again, these are people with whom you already have a commercial relationship. So that's clients, very important. That's where most of your short-term business is going to come from. Then there's prospects. These are people who are about to become clients. Again, bottom of funnel, you want to focus down there. You've already had some conversations. You're already getting to know each other. You may not have gotten to 14 interactions. Maybe you're only at 4, but these are people who will sooner or later convert. You're pretty confident. You're seeing buying signals. So you want to stay in the game. You don't want to take your eye off that ball. And then the third category is connectors. Now, Those often in professional services look like referral sources, but not necessarily. They can be mentors. They can be fans who, never actually refer, but they're always out there telling everybody about you. They can be business leaders who are influential, with whom you have a good relationship, who can help get you in the door. But ultimately, you want people who, again, the purpose of the relationship might be, or the benefit of the relationship might be a little more intangible, might not be so transactional. But ultimately, you recognize that being in that circle is going to benefit you. And you want to make sure that you're benefiting them as well, because that's a synergistic relationship that will only help to elevate you. So those are the three relationship categories that certainly in a professional services context, we found to be most useful.
Now, something interesting you said about clients, right? I mean, listen, I'm a coach. I have clients, and I have clients at different price ranges.
Sure.
Right? Because some clients are bigger and I have to do more, and
Yeah.
some are smaller. And you talk about three types of clients. There's the high value, the medium value, and the low value client. And I think maybe what we should do here, or have you do here, is explain those three clients and how do we want to manage our time, when we're networking here, and what we're doing with these three types of clients: the high value client, the medium value client, the low value client.
Yeah.
I'll let you go run with that.
Sure. Well, it's almost self-explanatory. Sometimes we'll use an aquatic metaphor. We'll say whale hunting versus, minnows versus trout or something like that. But the idea is simply that there are certain clients that are going to represent a larger portion of the business, or certainly more profit to your business than others, right? And your business, our business, many, businesses are going to find themselves with a lot of low value clients. The reason for that is that these are the clients who got you going, got you started, right? They were easier to get. They were down market. Maybe they were more price sensitive, but they were also less discerning in terms of who they were going to, work with. And a lot of us still have those clients hanging around, or we never got to the point where our mindset is oriented around abundance enough to say no to those people anymore, right? So we've got holdovers from a previous era, and we continue to say yes because we're afraid that, I don't want to say no to money, right? But the fact of the matter is these people take up time. And in fact, what I find is that a lot of times the low value clients take up an inordinate amount of time and energy. They're constantly quibbling over those invoices because they don't have the money to pay them. They're constantly asking for just one more favor because they don't want to pay for your time. They don't value your time like the high value clients do. Ultimately, in your heart of hearts, most people, what they want is just high value clients. They don't want to deal with all the rest of it. But because they haven't learned to say no, because they haven't learned how to cull their client base, because they haven't learned to be selective about who they surround themselves with, like a short list, they find themselves with a lot of riffraff that ultimately hold them back from being able to accomplish what they're truly capable of.
I want to jump here to the chapter 4, the characteristics of the people in your short list. And you introduced to me a concept that I had never seen before, that I found extraordinarily fascinating. It's called the influential score, which is a scale of 1 to 5 that helps you qualify people for your short list. And of course, 5 is the decision maker, 4 is gatekeeper, 3 is basically me, 2 is junior, 1 is very junior. Walk us through this influential score. What do we mean? It's a 5, it's a 4. I'm in the middle, and then there's junior, very junior. What do we mean by that in terms of that score?
Again, this all ties back to your SMART goal. So these are people who have the ability to influence your successful achievement of your SMART goal. Okay. So if for me, it's to grow my business, then a decision maker who is a high value client, I would put on this scale of 1 to 5 as a 5, right? Because they can actually help grow my business through one decision. That's fantastic. I want to make sure that I'm hanging out with those people as much as possible. A 4 might be a gatekeeper or an influencer or a connector who can get me to that 5, right? So I'm going to need some of those around me as well. And you tend to put yourself in the middle of this matrix because you have some influence over the achievement of your SMART goal too. Like if you don't get out of bed in the morning, nothing happens, right? And what's interesting is that you start to play it all the way through, and you're like, okay, well, if I'm a 3, then there are 2s. These are people who are less influential than me in helping me achieve my SMART goal. And then there's people who are even less influential than that. So someone less influential than me might be someone who is in another industry, not really connected to my industry, but relatively influential in their industry. So maybe they can help, but now it's getting to be a bit of a long shot. And if you actually take a step back and you look at this phenomenon that is referred to as homophily, what you see is that we tend to surround ourselves with people who are very much like us, socioeconomically, demographically, from a racial background perspective, even from a gender perspective, right? Like we have a tendency to want to be around people who look and act and live like we do, because then you can find more points of commonality. I talk about this in the book. It's like, well, if I drive a Toyota and you drive a Toyota, we can both kind of roll our eyes at that flashy McLaren that's going down the road. And wouldn't that be nice, right? Or if you and I drive McLarens, we can turn up our nose at the Yugo driver and we can be like, aren't I glad those days are behind me, right? Like we can connect on however it is that we identify in the world. The trouble is that while that is socially comfortable, it's not helpful from the perspective of achieving your SMART goals, because your SMART goals are necessarily going to require that you move up the influence score in terms of who you're hanging out with, right? So if you start this exercise at a 3 and you look around and sure enough, I have people who are moderately influential, but ultimately I want to go further up the chain, then you have to start choosing activities and forums and communities made up of at least 4s. And that's probably going to mean not hanging out at the same bar or restaurant that you keep going to and hanging out at the country club instead. Or it's going to mean not hanging out in the same networking group that you keep going to because those people are just like you, but rather going to some sort of industry conference where the decision makers are hanging out. And getting involved, getting on those communities, getting yourself situated so that when you start to look at who you have on speed dial, the influence scores of those people are starting to elevate. That's when you know that the quality of your shortlist is improving and that you are starting to surround yourself with more of those high value decision makers.
Evaluate your list, folks. That's what he's saying. Evaluate it. Take a look at what you got, and then let's start over. His name's David Ackert. The short list: How to Drive Business Development by Focusing on the People Who Matter Most. Absolutely outstanding, fantastic book. You're just hearing gold. By the way, folks, and there's so much gold in this book. Matter of fact, it's better than gold, it's diamonds. There's diamonds in this book. Absolutely fantastic. The exercises are phenomenal. Check it out. Get it wherever books are sold. You're listening to David Ackert here on A New Direction. Hey, folks, one click. That's all it takes for ransomware or phishing to shut your business down. Stop the threat at the source. Check out Data 443 Siren, CYREN, powered by the world's most robust threat and intelligence network. Siren detects and blocks attacks in real time, protecting your data and your employees and your reputation. Stop hoping you're safe and start knowing you're safe. Visit data443.com right now to see the solution in action. And Linda Craft, Team Realtors. You know what? If you're planning a move, you have to check out lindacraft.com. I know I'm biased. I get it. Honestly, it's much more than just a home listing website. Linda understands that moving impacts your whole family, including your kids and your pets, for example. That's why her website features exclusive advice from a child psychologist on how to help kids adjust to the move and tips from a veterinarian on how to move best with your pets. It's a complete emotional resource center for your family. Check them out. See the difference for yourself. Log on today. lindacraft.com, LINDACRAFT.com. And we're back here on A New Direction with David Ackert, the short list: How to Drive Business Development by Focusing on the People Who Matter Most. Bestseller, gold medal winner, absolutely fantastic book. I am so glad that you jumped into the influential number. You also alluded to the 4 characteristics of sustainable professional relationships. And you gave us a little bit about chemistry and a little bit about character. I want to dig into these, but I also want to talk about capability. And I also want to talk about collaboration, if we can dig into there, because I think the thing about these characteristics that are so important is that if we're going to have a long-term relationship, which means, and by the way, you talk about this in the book, we got to play the long game here. This isn't the short game. This is the long game. It's a short list, but we're playing the long game. We need 4 characteristics in there. You've kind of talked about that. We have to have some chemistry. Jump into, the character piece and let's go from there about character capability and collaboration.
Sure. And I think this is personal to everyone, right? What one person defines as a person of character might be different from what another person defines. It just depends on your personal values, obviously. But what I have found is that people have tells. And when you are in the process of networking, their tells are, as it turns out, very telling. Somebody who shows up a couple of minutes late to a meeting. Now you might think, David, come on, couple of minutes, like this is America, right? Everybody's a little late. Everybody's always like, oh, sorry, I was in back-to-backs. But I think the way that they navigate that friction tells you a lot about them. And what I have learned over the years is that, I've hired a lot of people for my company. And whenever there was a little red flag in that first interview, but I was like, no big deal, and I hired them anyway, I always came to regret it. That personality trait ended up flaring out, and just because they were 2 minutes late to that first meeting, it turns out, no, that's chronically them. They are 2 minutes late to every meeting. And, that could be managed, but for me, it is disrespectful if you don't at least, I don't know, send a note ahead. You send a quick email. Hey, I'm running late. I'm just giving you a heads up. I'm going to be 2 minutes late. Or when you show up, I'm not coming here to give you excuses, but I do want to acknowledge I was 2 minutes late, and I appreciate that that's just disrespectful of you, and it won't happen again. Like something like that shows me that you're a person of character and that you just had, a scheduling glitch. But if the person is always 2 minutes late, or if the person gives you some lame excuse like traffic, like I drove through the same traffic, what are you talking about, right? Then it just starts to show you that this is someone that you might not be able to depend upon. And for me, making sure that the people on my short list are people that I can depend upon is critical, because my SMART goal is dependent upon them, right? Like I have cherry picked these people. Look, I only have so many seats at this table. This is an honored position. Just as I would hope that if they put me on their short list, it's the same way. That is a privilege, and I need to step up for that, right? So that's the way I like to think about this. And it just helps me weed out the people that might be a waste of the time, or weed out this challenge of ultimately, as you say, we're playing the short list. This can't be the long list. We can't go for high volume. What are the mechanisms we're going to use to narrow folks down?
Yeah, I want to jump in on the character piece a little bit too, because there's something that you said that really was so true. And, when I have people who gossip about other people, or, complain about their previous company, or, that's a character thing I don't want a part of, because I know if you start talking about other people behind their back, I'm next in line.
Yep.
And so, and I know that, we all know these people and go, oh yeah, but they're such good people. But folks, when it comes to your short list, those can't be people on your list. There's no way, because you don't know what they're saying when you're not there. I can't trust it. And if I can't trust it, I can't have you on the list.
Well, I think this is going to be different for everyone, right? Everyone's got a different opinion when it comes to gossip. Some people are like, oh my God, I love the tea. Let's do it. Right. So that's fine, but know what your values are,
right?
And make sure that you are aligning with others who share those values. Because like you said, this is a relationship. This is not just a single date.
All right, talk about capability here. I thought this was interesting. It wasn't something that was on my list, but it probably is, just unknowingly. Talk about what you mean by capability.
Sure. The idea here is that, let's say that you have a referral source, right? And this is someone who you get referrals from time to time. Well, they are going to expect quid pro quo. They're going to expect that you're going to refer them from time to time too, right? Otherwise, you're just being a taker. So you need to make sure that you are confident in their competence. In other words, they are someone of high capability. Otherwise, you're going to hesitate before you refer them. I'm not going to put just anybody in front of my clients, right? Those are really valuable relationships for me. So if there's someone who, I don't know, is an accountant, and I'm going to introduce this accountant to my CEO client, well, that better be a really good accountant. And the problem here is we don't have any way of vetting their capability. unless I'm going to hire this accountant to be my accountant for my own business for a year before I start referring them, I don't really know. I just met them through a networking organization or something, or I was introduced to them and I thought, let me just pass this person along to somebody else, right? We are very loose and free with the way that we do this in traditional networking. So that's why in the book, I give some recommendations on how you can vet people to ensure that they are high capability without actually having to engage them. You want your referral sources and your connectors to be high in capability. You want your clients or your prospective clients to be low capability. And the reason for that is if they are just as good at what you do as you are or better, why would they hire you? And there are questions that you can ask during discovery that also give you some sense of their capability or their challenges, their bandwidth. What is it that would have them come to you and hire you? Because ultimately that's going to be their intrinsic motivator.
I'm going to jump ahead here. We got just a couple minutes left here on the show to part 2, attracting people to your shortlist, chapter 6, the niche or the niche, whatever you want to call it. I don't care. It doesn't bother me one way or another. There is the plight of the generalist that you talk, but which, by the way, I fell into early on in my career, right? I fell early on in my career being the generalist, being, whatever it is, I'll just do it.
Yeah.
Right? Almost kind of the Dirty Harry kind of thing. You remember the first Dirty Harry movie? Why they call you Dirty Harry? It's because I do all the dirty jobs nobody else wants to do, right? That was kind of
it's kind of cut. I don't remember that one.
I'm going way back there, brother.
I remember something about "Go ahead, make my day." Is that Dirty Harry?
No, okay. I'm going back to some deep cuts. Okay.
All right.
But let's talk about the importance, because we say it all the time. You need to carve out a niche that differentiates you from your competition, such and so forth. But let's talk about this plight of the generalist and why it's such a problem in terms of pitching, networking, cross-selling, and to talk about that, because that niche is so important, really creating that for yourself.
Jay, I wrote this book or published this book last year. Most of the writing got done the year before. And this was before AI was as prevalent as it is today.
Mm-hmm.
If I was writing the book today, I would really hammer this point, because as much as the plight of the generalist has inherent challenges, and it's very difficult to differentiate from the competition, very difficult to charge premium rates for something that is so commonly found. And ultimately, I think a generalist is probably someone who's just afraid to really lean into what makes them unique, because they're afraid that it's going to narrow their marketplace. All those things are true. But in a world where AI is becoming more and more prevalent, I think generalists are really going to struggle, because now there are only 2 things that are going to help build a moat around your business. One of them is the depth of relationships you formed with your buyers and prospective buyers and referral sources. So your shortlist. People are going to make emotional decisions in who they send business to. Oh, I love Jay. Of course I'm going to use Jay. Of course I'd never use anybody else. That's because you invested in this relationship. But the other thing is going to be, it's really hard to find somebody who has the level of niche expertise like Jay does. I can't just Google that, right? There's a very short list of people who do that in the way that he does it. And I'm not sure I'm going to trust AI to go be a niche expert on something. But general information, I probably will just use AI for that. And I think the more this becomes a part of our lives, the more we really have to double down on what makes us special, what makes us unique, and what ultimately we can go deep into when it comes to providing meaningful value to the people we work with.
David, we've done an hour. It's been absolutely fantastic. It's gone fast. It always goes fast when I'm doing the show. Tell people how they can get a hold of you. I also know you've got an app. I'd love to promote the app on the blog post too, or anything else. So let people in on some of the secret sauces that you have available to them.
Sure. Well, it all starts at pipelineplus.com. That's our company website. So plus is spelled out, pipeline.plus.com. And you can learn more about the app, where people can use the app and license it to manage their short list. It gives them reminders on who to follow up with and what to do with those people, so that they never run out of ideas on how to stay top of mind. And then, of course, we have coaching services, and we, as you said, I'm doing keynotes all the time. There's a whole team in our team that is providing these services to enable business development and professional services firms. So if they just start there, they'll probably find something intriguing.
That's awesome. Stay with me, David. Hey, folks, this is the show. You know what I say to you every week, right? You're in control of three things: your attitude, your effort, and your resiliency. The fact of the matter is, life doesn't always give us what we want, or we didn't choose it, but we are still in control of our attitude. And you know what? It's not easy, but you can. So take control of it. Your effort is tied to your excellence. We don't always have the same amount of energy in the tank, but what you do have, be excellent with it. And that's part of your effort. Again, that's in your control. And the fact of the matter is, we're always going to get punched in the teeth or punched in the gut, and we're getting knocked down, but it's up to you to get back up. Why? Because you're worth it, and we want you on the team. You know what? You had a lot of choices. You chose us. Thank you for doing that. You know what? Give us a thumbs up on YouTube, wherever you're listening to this show. Give us a 5-star positive review. Tell your friends. We always appreciate that. We can always use more listeners and subscribers. So as I say to you all over everywhere, you know what that is. Ciao, everybody.